The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Pacific as I pushed through the glass doors of the seaside gym in Monterey. At 58, I had settled into the comfortable rhythms of a life well lived, or so I told myself. My marriage to James had weathered 32 years of storms and calms, but somewhere along the way, we had become like two old lighthouses, standing strong but separate, casting our beams in different directions. The familiar scent of salt air mixed with the metallic tang of exercise equipment greeted me as I made my way to the women's locker room. Tuesday mornings had become my sanctuary, a 2-hour escape from the predictable cadence of grocery lists, dinner preparations, and the gentle, distant companionship that my marriage had evolved into. James was a good man, reliable, successful, devoted in his own quiet way, but the fire that had once burned between us had dimmed to barely glowing embers.
I changed into my workout clothes with the same methodical precision I applied to everything else in my life. Black leggings, a modest tank top, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The mirror reflected a woman who looked her age but wore it well. Laugh lines that spoke of happiness, silver threading through chestnut hair like moonbeams, a figure maintained through dedication rather than vanity. That Tuesday changed everything. As I emerged from the locker room, adjusting my water bottle and towel, I saw him. Ethan moved through the gym like poetry in motion, 25 years old, with the kind of natural grace that made lifting weights look like an art form. His dark hair cut the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and when those deep hazel eyes met mine across the room, I felt something I thought had died long ago stir to life in my chest. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. The usual sounds of the gym, the rhythmic clank of weights, the hum of treadmills, the soft murmur of conversations faded in the background noise. All I could hear was the sudden thundering of my own heartbeat, loud enough that I was certain everyone in the room must be able to hear it.
My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the weight on the leg press. What was happening to me? I was a respectable woman, married, settled. I had a mortgage and a garden club membership and a standing appointment with my hairdresser every 6 weeks. Yet something about this young man's presence made the air feel electric, charged with possibilities I hadn't dared to dream in decades. He smiled, a gentle, acknowledging nod, and returned to his workout. But that smile, it was like watching the first star appear in the evening sky, unexpected and breathtaking. It reached his eyes, crinkling them at the corners, and something in his expression suggested recognition, as if he had seen something in me worth noticing. I tried to focus on my routine, but my eyes kept drifting to him like compass needles seeking magnetic north. The way he moved was hypnotic, fluid, and confident, each motion deliberate and graceful. When he laughed at something another gym member said, the sound was rich and genuine, and it sent warmth cascading through my chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Get yourself together, Laura," I whispered under my breath, but my heart wasn't listening to reason. Over the following weeks, I found myself timing my gym visits around his schedule with the dedication of a scholar. I memorized which machines he preferred. The cable rows first, then free weights, always finishing with the stationary bike. I learned that he took his water breaks at 15-minute intervals, that he favored the bench closest to the windows, that his laugh came easily and often. I began to notice the little things that made him unique. The way he always wiped down equipment thoroughly, even if it already looks clean. How he helped elderly members reach high shelves or adjust machines without being asked.
the small scar above his left eyebrow that suggested childhood adventures, the way he unconsciously ran his fingers through his hair when he was concentrating. "You're looking wonderful lately, Laura," my friend Margaret commented one afternoon as we shared coffee at our usual spot overlooking the harbor. "There's something different about you. A glow." If only she knew. The glow came from stolen glances, from the way Ethan's eyes lingered on mine when he thought no one was looking, from the electricity that sparked whenever our paths crossed near the water fountain. Each morning I found myself standing before my bedroom mirror longer than usual, seeing not just the woman who had lived 58 years, but the woman who still had so much living left to do. I began choosing my workout attire with newfound care. The deep blue leggings that James had once complimented, saying they made my legs look endless. The fitted tank top in sage green that brought out my eyes. A touch of lip gloss, just enough to feel feminine and alive. Each small choice felt like an act of rebellion against the comfortable invisibility that middle age seemed to demand. Our first real conversation happened on a Wednesday that dawned gray and misty, with fog rolling in from the Pacific like ghostly fingers reaching for shore. I was struggling with the cable machine, my form all wrong, when Ethan appeared beside me like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known I was praying. "May I?" he asked, his voice soft and respectful, tinged with what sounded like genuine concern. His hands guided mine to the proper position, and suddenly the world contracted to the space between us. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, something fresh and oceanic that made my head spin with its complexity. Cedar and sea salt and something indefinably masculine that went straight to my core. When he adjusted my stance, his palm rested briefly on my lower back, and I swear I felt that touch like lightning through my entire being. My skin seemed to come alive under his hand, every nerve ending suddenly alert and stinging with awareness. The contact lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds rewrote something fundamental in my understanding of what it meant to be touched. "There," he said, stepping back just far enough to maintain propriety. "You'll feel it in your lats now, but you won't strain your shoulders." But all I could feel was the lingering warmth where his hand had been, the phantom pressure that seemed burned into my skin like a brand. When he said my name, "You're welcome, Laura," his voice wrapped around it like velvet, and I felt something deep inside me unfurl like a flower opening to sunlight. He knew my name. Somehow, that felt like the most romantic thing in the world. "How did you—" I began, then blushed at the obvious pleasure in my voice. "Your membership card," he said, and there was something almost shy in his smile. "I'm Ethan." "I know," I said, then immediately felt heat flood my cheeks. "I mean, I heard someone call you that. I didn't mean to." "It's okay," he said, and his laugh was warm honey poured over rough edges. "I've been hoping for a chance to introduce myself properly." The admission hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. I should have made polite conversation and walked away. I should have remembered my wedding ring, my comfortable life, the 32 years of history that bound me to James. Instead, I found myself drowning in hazel eyes that looked at me as if I were something precious and rare. "I should finish my workout," I said finally, though every fiber of my being wanted to stay in this moment forever. "Of course," he said, but he didn't move away immediately. "Maybe I'll see you around." It wasn't a question, but it felt like a promise. Our interactions became a carefully choreographed dance after that. He would appear at just the right moment to spot me during a challenging set.
his hands hovering protectively near the bar, ready to catch it if I faltered. I would offer advice about the best post-workout smoothie at the juice bar, recommending the mango ginger blend with a knowing smile. We created a world within the world, full of meaningful glances and conversations that seemed innocent on the surface, but thrummed with deeper currents underneath.
Each encounter was a small masterpiece of controlled longing. The way his fingertips would brush mine when he handed me a towel I'd dropped. How I would lean just slightly closer when he explained proper form, breathing in that intoxicating scent that was uniquely his. The electricity that crackled between us when we found ourselves alone in the stretching area, late afternoon sun slanting through the windows and casting everything in golden, dreamlike light. "Tell me about yourself, Laura," he said one such afternoon, settling onto the mat beside me as I worked on my flexibility routine. Where can I even begin? How could I tell him about the woman I used to be, the one who danced until dawn at college parties, who wrote poetry by candlelight in her tiny apartment, who believed in grand gestures and fairy tale endings? That woman had been dormant so long, buried under layers of responsibility and routine, that I'd almost forgotten she existed. "I'm still figuring that out," I said instead, surprising myself with my honesty. He smiled, that devastating smile that made my heart forget its steady rhythm and stumble into something wilder and more dangerous. I like that answer. Most people think they have themselves all figured out by now.
"And you don't think I should?" I asked, stretching my arms overhead and trying not to notice how his gaze followed the movement. "I think you're full of surprises," he said quietly. "I think there are depths to you that most people never get to see." The way he looked at me in that moment, as if I were a mystery worth solving, a book he wanted to read cover to cover, made me feel more alive than I had in years. This wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, as if he saw something in me that even I had lost sight of. The evening I asked Ethan to join me for coffee at the Pure Cafe, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate for freedom. I had rehearsed the words a dozen times in my car before entering the gym, but when the moment came, they tumbled out in a breathless rush that sounded nothing like the casual invitation I had planned. "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter?" The words escaped before I could lose my nerve, hanging in the air between us like a bridge I couldn't uncross. His face lit up with such genuine pleasure that I felt tears prick at my eyes. When had anyone last looked at me with such unguarded delight? When had an invitation from me been received as a gift rather than an obligation? "I'd love that," he said simply, and those 3 words rearranged my entire world. The walk to the cafe felt like a first date and a homecoming all at once. The salt breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the nearby gardens, and Ethan's laughter and my stories about the gym's eccentric members created a bubble of intimacy around us that made the rest of the world fade away. When he held the door open for me, his hand briefly touched my lower back, in that same spot that had become sacred ground, and I wondered if he could hear my heart singing. We chose a table by the window overlooking the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed like colorful toys in the gentle waves. The late afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and when Ethan settled into the chair across from me, I felt as if I were living inside a painting, everything soft-edged and luminous and too beautiful to be real. The conversation flowed as naturally as the tide. He told me about his dreams of becoming a marine biologist, his eyes lighting up as he described the mysteries hidden beneath the ocean's surface. He spoke of conservation efforts and coral restoration with the passion of someone who had found his true calling, and I found myself captivated, not just by his words, but by the animation in his face, the graceful gestures of his hands as he painted pictures in the air. "The ocean never lies," he said, his voice soft with reverence.
It's always exactly what it is, even when it's dangerous or unpredictable. There's something honest about that.
I found myself sharing things I hadn't spoken aloud in years. My abandoned novel, sitting in a drawer at home, collecting dust and broken dreams. My secret love of old movies. The way I would sneak downstairs after James fell asleep to watch Casablanca or Roman Holiday with the volume turned low. How I used to watch the sunrise from my bedroom window before the world woke up, feeling like I was stealing moments of beauty that belonged only to me. "You're a romantic," he said, and there was something almost wondering in his voice. "I can see it in the way you describe things, like you're seeing the world through a special lens that makes everything more beautiful." "Is that so terrible?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Terrible?" He leaned forward, his intensity making my breath catch. "It's extraordinary. Most people lose that as they get older. They become practical, cynical, but you've kept it alive." His hand moved across the small table, and his fingers brushed mine where they rested beside my coffee cup. The contact was brief, barely a whisper of skin against skin, but it sent electricity shooting up my arm and straight to my heart.
"You have beautiful hands," he said suddenly, his eyes on my fingers as they trembled slightly under his gaze. The compliment was so unexpected, so tender, that tears pricked at my eyes. When had anyone last noticed my hands? When had anyone looked at me with such gentle appreciation for something so simple, so overlooked? "Ethan," I whispered, not trusting my voice with more. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, pulling his hand back. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't." I reached across the table, my fingers seeking his with a boldness that surprised us both. When our hands connected palm to palm, the world seemed to still around us. The harbor lights began to twinkle to life outside the window. The touch was innocent enough to any observer, but between us it felt charged with all the words we couldn't say, all the possibilities we were afraid to name. "Laura," he said finally, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my wrist, "I need you to know. Whatever this is between us, I don't take it lightly. I know your situation is complicated. My situation, my marriage, the life I had built with James, solid and respectable and suffocating in its predictability, the weight of it settled on my shoulders like a familiar burden. But for once, it felt like something I might be strong enough to set down." "I know," I said softly, "but sitting here with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. Is that wrong?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but it doesn't feel wrong." When James left for his business conference in San Francisco, I spent 3 days planning the perfect evening with the precision of a military strategist and the heart of a woman falling deeply, irrevocably in love. This wasn't just dinner. It was a declaration, a bridge between the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. I chose the menu with the care of a conductor selecting musicians for a symphony, fresh salmon with herbs from my garden, the one James had always teased me about spending too much time in, roasted vegetables that would fill the house with the warm, earthy sense of home, a bottle of Pinot Noir from a little vineyard we had discovered during our honeymoon, a wine that spoke of celebration and possibility and new beginnings. And for dessert, chocolate mousse, rich, indulgent, unapologetically romantic. The dress took me an hour to choose. I stood before my closet like a painter contemplating a blank canvas, rejecting option after option until I found it. The deep green silk that James had bought me for our anniversary 2 years ago, and that I had never worn. It fell in soft waves around my body, making me feel elegant and feminine and powerful all at once. The neckline was modest but flattering, the color bringing out the green flecks in my eyes that I had almost forgotten existed. When I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, a woman glowing with anticipation and hope, alive in ways I had forgotten were possible. Ethan arrived exactly on time, and when I opened the door, the expression on his face made every moment of preparation worthwhile. His eyes widened, then softened, and he looked at me as if I were a work of art he couldn't quite believe he was allowed to admire. He carried a single white rose, perfect and unblemished. "I thought about bringing a dozen," he said, offering me the bloom with a tenderness that made my knees weak. "But this one reminded me of you. Simple, elegant, and absolutely beautiful." The rose trembled in my hands as I brought it to my nose, inhaling its sweet perfume. No one had brought me flowers in years. James was practical about such things. He would ask, what was the point of buying something that would just die in a few days? But Ethan understood that the beauty was in the gesture, not the permanence. "It's perfect," I whispered. "You're perfect." Dinner was magical in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The salmon was cooked to perfection. The wine paired beautifully with the meal. But it was the conversation that made the evening extraordinary. We talked about everything and nothing. His childhood in Oregon, where he had learned to surf on freezing beaches and developed his love for marine life. My college days studying literature, when I had dreams of writing the great American novel and changing the world with my words.
"Do you still write?" he asked, taking a sip of wine and watching me over the rim of his glass. "I try to," I admitted, "mostly in the early mornings before the world wakes up. James thinks it's a waste of time." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes at the mention of my husband, but he kept his voice gentle. "What do you write about?" "Love," I said, then blushed at my own honesty. "Different kinds of love. The kind that sustains you through decades of ordinary days, and the kind that arrives like lightning and changes everything in an instant." "And which kind do you prefer?" he asked quietly. I looked at him across my dining room table, this beautiful young man who had awakened parts of me I thought were dead forever, and I knew my answer would change everything. I used to think the first kind was the only one that mattered. Safe, predictable, built on shared history and mutual respect. But now, I paused, gathering courage. Now I think maybe both kinds are necessary. Maybe we need the lightning to remind us what it feels like to be truly alive. After dinner, we moved to the living room where I had arranged soft lighting and put Ella Fitzgerald on the stereo. The music wrapped around us like velvet as we sat on the sofa, closer than we had ever been. I could feel the heat of his body, smell that intoxicating cologne that had become my weakness. "Dance with me," I said impulsively, the wine making me brave. He stood and extended his hand with old-fashioned gallantry, and when he pulled me into his arms, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. We swayed to the music in my living room, his hand warm and strong on my lower back, mine resting over his heart, where I could feel its steady, strong rhythm. The space between us seemed to shrink with each breath, each gentle movement. His face was so close to mine that I could see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes, could count each individual eyelash. When his thumb began tracing small circles on my back, I felt my knees go weak. "Laura," he whispered into my hair. And my name on his lips sounded like a prayer, like a promise, like everything I had been waiting my whole life to hear. I tilted my face up to his, and time seemed to suspend itself. His eyes searched mine, asking a question that I answered by rising up on my toes, closing the last inch between us. Our first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. But when I sighed against his lips, something broke free in both of us. His arms tightened around me, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and recognition and a connection that transcended age and circumstance and every practical reason why we shouldn't be in each other's arms. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, our foreheads pressed together as if we could merge souls through proximity.
I've been dreaming about this, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. So have I admitted, every night for weeks. Our relationship bloomed like spring after a long, harsh winter. Every stolen moment became precious. Walks along the moonlit beach where he would take my hand as naturally as breathing, his fingers intertwining with mine as if they had been designed to fit together. Afternoon coffee dates where we would talk until the cafe closed around us, our conversations ranging from literature to marine biology to our dreams for the future. Ethan had a way of making me feel like the only woman in the world. When I told him about my abandoned novel, he listened with such genuine interest that I found myself digging out the dusty manuscript from its hiding place in my desk drawer. I hadn't looked at it in 5 years, but as Ethan read the first chapter, his face lighting up with appreciation, I remembered why I had loved writing in the first place. "This is beautiful, Laura," he said, looking up from the pages with wonder. "The way you describe emotion, it's like you're painting with words." "It's not very good," I protested, but the praise warmed me from the inside out. "It's extraordinary. Promise me you'll finish it." When I worried about the lines around my eyes, the way my body had changed over the decades, he would trace those lines with his fingertips as if they were sacred texts.
"You're not older," he said one evening as we watched the sunset from my garden, the sky painted in shades of rose and gold. "You're seasoned, like fine wine or a perfect piece of music. All the depth and complexity makes you more beautiful, not less." I cried that night, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of being truly seen and cherished. When had anyone last made me feel not just desired, but valued for the fullness of who I was? We made love for the first time on a Thursday afternoon when rain drummed against the windows of my house and the world felt like it consisted of only the two of us. It was gentle and passionate and reverent all at once, as if we were both aware that we were crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. Afterward, we lay tangled together in my bed, the bed I had shared with James for so many years, and I felt no guilt, only a profound sense of rightness. Ethan's fingers traced patterns on my bare shoulder, and every touch sent shivers of pleasure through my entire body. "I love you," he whispered into the dim afternoon light, and the words settled into my heart like coming home. "I love you too," I replied, and meant it with every fiber of my being.
But the guilt was my constant companion during the quiet moments. Every laugh shared with Ethan was shout by thoughts of James sleeping peacefully beside me each night, trusting and unaware. Every kiss stolen in a quiet corner of the cafe felt like a betrayal of the man who had loved me faithfully for 3 decades, who brought me coffee every morning and never forgot our anniversary. James was not a bad husband. That would have made this easier. He was kind and reliable and devoted in his quiet way. But somewhere along the journey of our marriage, we had stopped seeing each other as lovers and become more like roommates, comfortable and familiar, but lacking the spark that made life feel worth living. Still, I couldn't stop. Ethan had awakened something in me that felt essential, like breathing. The way he listened to my dreams with rapt attention, encouraged my writing with genuine enthusiasm, made me feel vital and alive and beautiful. It was addictive and necessary and terrifying all at once. You should lead him, Ethan said one evening as we walked hand in hand along the beach, waves crashing against the shore in an internal rhythm. We shouldn't have to hide anymore.
It's not that simple, I protested, even as my heart leaped at the possibility. There's 32 years of history, a life we've built together. But are you happy in that life? He asked, stopping to face me, his hands cupping my face with infinite tenderness. When you wake up next to him, do you feel like you're exactly where you belong? The question hung in the salt air between us, and we both knew the answer. The night James came home early from his conference, finding me on the phone with Ethan in our bedroom, laughing at something my lover had said, was the beginning of the end of my carefully constructed double life. I saw the suspicion bloom in my husband's eyes like a dark flower, watched as the pieces clicked together in his mind. The quiet questions that followed over the next few days were almost worse than outright accusations would have been. James was methodical in his approach to uncovering the truth, just as he was methodical about everything else. He found the restaurant receipts I'd forgotten to hide, noticed the new perfume I'd started wearing, observed the way I smiled at my phone when text messages arrived. I can't do this anymore, Ethan said during one of our walks along the beach a week later. The waves crashed against the shore with unusual violence, as if echoing the turmoil in our hearts. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind whipped my hair around my face like a wild halo. Can't do what? I asked, though I knew what he meant. I'm falling in love with you, Laura. Have fallen in love with you. His voice was raw with emotion, and when I looked at him, I saw tears in his eyes. But I can't be the secret you keep. I can't be the thing you hide from your real life. You're not a secret, I protested. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Aren't I? When was the last time we went somewhere public together? When was the last time you introduced me to one of your friends? I'm 25 years old, and I'm in love with a married woman who's afraid to be seen with me. His words cut deep because they held so much truth. I had been protecting my reputation, my comfortable life, even as I claimed to love him completely. But looking at this beautiful, brave young man who had risked so much just by caring for me, I knew what I had to do. The conversation with James was the hardest thing I had ever done in my 58 years of life. 32 years of marriage deserved more than secrets and lies, more than the slow fade into indifference that we had both been accepting as inevitable. I chose an evening when the house felt peaceful, when James was settled in his reading chair with a book he'd been working through for months. The familiar domestic scene, him in his comfortable sweater, reading glasses perched on his nose. The soft glow of the table lamp made what I had to say even more difficult. James, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk. He looked up from his book, and I saw that he already knew. The knowledge was there in his eyes, along with a resignation and a sadness that made my heart clench. I know about him, he said quietly, setting his book aside. The young man from the gym. I sat down across from him, my hands folded in my lap like I was a schoolgirl called to account for her transgressions. How long have you known? Few weeks,
maybe longer if I'm honest. You've been different, Laura. Alive in a way you haven't been in years. I should be furious. But mostly I'm sad that we lost each other somewhere along the way.
His grace in that moment, his ability to see beyond his own hurt to the truth of what our marriage had become, made me love him in a different way than I ever had before. Not as a wife loves a husband, but as one human being loves another who has shared their journey, for better and worse. "I never meant for this to happen," I said through tears that came freely now. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," he said softly, "and I never meant to stop seeing you, really seeing you, the way I did when we first met. We both let our marriage become comfortable instead of passionate, predictable instead of alive. We talked through the night, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, but mostly just honest, in a way we hadn't been in years. We talked about the early days of our marriage, when everything felt possible. We talked about how we had gradually stopped dreaming together, stopped surprising each other, stopped making an effort to fall in love with each other anew each day." "Do you love him?" James asked as dawn began to creep through our bedroom windows.
"Yes," I said simply. There was no point in softening it.
"And he loves you?"
"Yes." James was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft with something that might have been relief. "Then maybe this is how it was always supposed to end. Not with hatred or bitterness, but with both of us finding the courage to admit that sometimes loving someone means letting them go find what makes them truly happy." The divorce was peaceful, but painful. The end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. James was generous in the settlement, more generous than I deserved, he said, though I disagreed. We divided our life with the same methodical care we had applied to everything else in our marriage, but this time the care felt loving rather than routine. "I want you to be happy, Laura," he said on the day I moved out of our house, the house where we had shared 3 decades of ordinary mornings and quiet evenings. Really, truly happy. And if that young man can give you what I couldn't, then I'm grateful to him. Ethan and I moved in together 6 months later, into a small cottage overlooking the bay that seemed designed for new love. It had wide windows that let in floods of natural light, a garden where I could grow herbs and flowers, and a small study where I could write. The townspeople whispered, as small-town people do, but their disapproval felt powerless against the strength of what we had built. Our love was different from anything I had experienced. Passionate but peaceful, exciting but secure. Where my marriage to James had been built on shared history and mutual respect, my relationship with Ethan was built on recognition and choice. We chose each other every day, not out of obligation or convenience, but because being together made both of us more than we were apart. He encouraged me to finish my novel with the enthusiasm of someone who believed wholeheartedly in my talent. When I doubted myself, he would read passages aloud, his voice bringing my words to life in ways that made me remember why I had fallen in love with writing in the first place. "You have something important to say," he told me one morning as we sat in our sun-drenched kitchen, coffee steaming in our cups and my manuscript pages spread between us. "Don't let fear keep you from saying it." I supported his return to school, working extra hours at the bookstore I had taken a job at to help pay for his marine biology degree. Watching him pursue his passion with such dedication and joy was like watching someone come fully alive, and I felt privileged to be part of his journey. The age difference that had once seemed insurmountable became irrelevant in the face of our deep connection. Yes, people stared when we walked down the street hand in hand. Yes, there were whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. But we were two souls who had recognized each other across time and circumstance, choosing love over convention, authenticity over comfort. Do you ever regret it? I asked him one evening as we sat on our small deck, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Falling in love with someone so much older? Missing out on experiences with someone your own age?
He turned to me with such intensity that my breath caught. Laura, you are the most alive person I know. You see beauty everywhere, you dream big dreams, you love with your whole heart. Why would I want to miss out on that? 3 years later, I stand in our garden, watching Ethan photograph the morning light on the ocean for his graduate research. At 61, I feel more beautiful and alive than I did at 25. The lines on my face have deepened, my hair has gone fully silver, but my eyes sparkle with the light of a woman who has found her true home. My second novel will be published next spring, a story about love found late in life, about the courage it takes to start over, about the beauty that exists in unexpected connections. The first novel, the one Ethan encouraged me to finish, became a surprise bestseller, touching the hearts of women who recognize their own stories of awakening in its pages. Ethan's thesis on coastal marine ecosystems is groundbreaking work that will help preserve these waters for future generations. Watching him present his research at conferences, seeing the passion and intelligence that first drew me to him, now focused on making the world a better place, fills me with pride that goes beyond personal love to encompass admiration for the man he's becoming. We are proof that love doesn't follow society's timeline or rules. Sometimes it arrives when you least expect it, wearing the face of someone who sees your soul and chooses to cherish it. Sometimes the greatest risk is also the greatest reward. Sometimes the courage to be truly authentic leads to a happiness you never dared to imagine. James remarried last year, a lovely woman named Catherine, who shares his love of gardening and quiet evenings at home. When I saw them together at the farmer's market, I felt nothing but joy for him. He looked peaceful, content in a way he hadn't in our final years together. We nodded politely to each other, two people who had shared a lifetime and parted with grace. The waves continue their eternal dance with the shore outside our cottage window. And like them, we have found our rhythm. Constant, beautiful, and forever changing, yet forever true. Each morning, I wake beside the man I love and feel grateful not just for the love itself, but for the courage it took to claim it. In the margins of my notebook, I write, "Love is not a young woman's privilege. It is the birthright of every heart brave enough to remain open to possibility." And as Ethan's laughter carries on the ocean breeze, mixing with the eternal song of the waves, I know that some stories don't end. They simply transform into new chapters of joy, each one more beautiful than the last. We are writing our love story in the sand, in stars, in morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, and passionate kisses stored in the garden at twilight. We are proof that the heart knows no seasons, that love recognizes no boundaries except those we create for ourselves. Tonight, as every night, I will fall asleep in the arms of the man who saw me, really saw me when I had almost forgotten how to see myself. And tomorrow, as every tomorrow, I will wake up grateful for the courage that led me here, to this life, to this love, to this extraordinary second chance at happiness. The tide comes in, the tide goes out, but our love remains constant as the stars, deep as the ocean, and infinite as the possibilities that wait two hearts brave enough to leap into the unknown together.